Kelechi, who carried big dreams in his heart. Every day he worked endlessly, sometimes under the hot sun, sometimes late into the night, saving every single naira he could. He wasn't saving for luxury or comfort. He had a vision: to start his own logistics business, something that would not only change his life but also give him pride and independence. Each time he added money to his savings, he felt one step closer to honoring the memory of his late mother, who always encouraged him to build his own future. But one evening everything collapsed. Kelechi rushed to the bank to check his account, only to find it completely empty. First he thought it was a mistake. He asked the teller to check again, his hands shaking. But the truth hit him harder than a blow. His entire savings was gone. Not a single naira left. His chest tightened, his breath grew heavy, and questions flooded his mind. Who could do this? How could this happen? The answer was even more painful than the loss itself. He soon discovered that it was his own father, Chief Obinna, who had withdrawn every penny. Not to help the family, not to support Kelechi's dreams, but to buy a luxury car for Tebena, the spoiled son of his new wife. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Kelechi felt his knees weaken as reality sank in. His own father had stolen his future and handed it to someone else. That night, Kelechi's world shattered, and his heart broke in silence. Kelechi could not keep the storm inside him any longer. That same evening, he walked straight into his father's mansion, his heart pounding but his steps firm. The grand house, with its shining marble floors and golden curtains, felt colder than ever before. He stood in the middle of the living room where his father, Chief Obinna, sat like a king in his armchair. His stepmother, Ngozi, lounged beside him, her face painted with pride, while Tebena scrolled through his shiny new phone, car keys dangling from his hand. Kelechi's voice shook, but his anger gave him strength. "Father, how could you do this to me? I worked for years, saving every naira. That money was my dream, my future. How could you take it without even asking me?" His eyes burned, his chest rose and fell quickly. He hoped, even for a second, that his father would show regret, maybe even apologize. But Obinna only leaned back, smirking with the arrogance of power. "Kelechi, you're young. You have time to make money again. Tebena needs it more now. Learn your place in this house." His words were sharp, cold, and dismissive, like Kelechi's dreams meant nothing. Ngozi chuckled softly, her smirk cutting through him like a blade. "Your father made the right decision. A real son deserves to be rewarded," she said, throwing a proud glance at her own child. Then came the final blow. Tebena lifted his eyes from his phone, a mocking smile playing on his lips. "Thanks for sponsoring my ride, brother," he said, shaking the car keys in his hand like a trophy. The words echoed in Kelechi's ears, each syllable stabbing at his pride. Kelechi's throat tightened, his vision blurred with tears, but he refused to let them fall in front of them. "So this is what I am to you. Just someone you can rob. Someone you can humiliate." His voice cracked, trembling with pain. Obinna waved his hand, as if brushing away a nuisance. "Enough. Don't raise your voice in my house. Be grateful you even have a roof over your head." The words broke Kelechi's last thread of hope. He looked around the mansion that was supposed to be his home, but it felt like the walls were pushing him out. His late mother's presence, once warm and protective, seemed so far away now. In that moment, he realized he was alone, more alone than ever, despite having a father alive. Kelechi turned away, his tears finally spilling as he walked out the door. The sound of their laughter and Tebena's mocking voice followed him like a cruel shadow. The night air hit his face as he stepped outside, but it did not cool the fire in his chest. His heart was broken, but deep inside a quiet voice whispered, "They may have stolen my savings, but they will never steal my spirit." The night in was quiet, the streets almost empty except for the glow of the dim streetlights. Kelechi sat alone on a rusty bench near the roadside, his head bent, his hands clutching his empty wallet as if it still carried the weight of his hard-earned savings. The same wallet that once gave him hope now felt like nothing more than a cruel reminder of his loss. He stared at it, his vision blurred with tears, his chest heavy with pain. His heart ached not only because of the money but because of who had taken it, his own father. That betrayal cut deeper than anything else. For years, Kelechi had dreamed of building a business, of becoming someone his late mother would be proud of. He had denied himself comfort, working long hours, saving every naira, all for a brighter future. And now, with just one selfish decision, his father had stolen everything. Kelechi leaned back against the bench, the cold air brushing against his face. The streets were silent, yet inside him a storm raged. He remembered his mother's gentle voice, words she often told him when life was hard. "They will try to break you. Don't let them." Her voice echoed in his mind as if she were sitting right beside him, comforting him through the darkness. Tears rolled down his cheeks, unstoppable. He tried to wipe them away, but they kept falling. "Why, Mama?" he whispered into the night. "Why would he do this to me? Am I not his son too?" His voice cracked, breaking the silence around him. In that lonely moment, he felt like the world had turned its back on him. He had a father, yet he felt like an orphan. But as the minutes passed, something inside him shifted. The tears, though painful, began to dry. The ache in his chest started to harden into something else. Resolve. His mother's words were not just memories. They were strength. "Don't let them break you." Kelechi sat up straighter, gripping his wallet tightly, as though holding on to his last bit of courage. "They think they've destroyed me," he whispered to himself. "But this is not the end. One day father will see. One day, he will regret choosing another's child over his own." The night was still dark, but a new fire burned in his eyes. It wasn't the fire of anger alone, it was determination. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. He had no money, no support, and no one to lean on. But he still had his skills, his hands, his mind, and the voice of his mother guiding him. That was enough. As he rose from the bench and walked into the shadows of woods, the city lights in the distance seemed to shine brighter than before. Kelechi was no longer just a boy broken by betrayal. He was a man ready to fight back. And though the world didn't know it yet, that night was the beginning of his rise. The next morning, Kelechi woke up with swollen eyes from the night of crying, but his spirit had already begun to change. He knew he had nothing left in his bank account, no one to support him, and no soft place to land. But he also knew one thing clearly: he was not going to give up. If his own father could betray him, then he would depend only on himself from now on. He started small, taking a job at a fuel station in Abuja. Every day he wore the same worn-out shirt and stood under the scorching sun, filling tanks for strangers. The pay was little, barely enough to buy food, but Kelechi saved even from that. He skipped meals many nights, drinking only water because every naira mattered. Customers often ignored him. Some even shouted at him when impatient, but Kelechi never lost his manners. He reminded himself, "This is not my destination. This is only a step." But working at the fuel station was not enough to feed his dreams. So at night, after his shift, he went to small cybercafes or borrowed old laptops from friends. He had always been curious about computers, and now he pushed himself to learn more. He took online jobs, basic coding, building small websites, fixing bugs for clients overseas. Sometimes he worked until dawn, his eyes burning, his body exhausted, but he kept going. Sleep became a luxury, food became rare, but his determination grew stronger each day. Slowly, he started to piece together an idea. He noticed how transport and delivery businesses in Nigeria were struggling. No proper systems, no tracking, no structure. He thought, what if I create something that can fix this? That was the seed of Swift Connect Africa. It started as just notes scribbled on paper, then as a small program on his borrowed laptop. Every penny he earned from coding went straight into developing his idea. He didn't buy new clothes, didn't go out with friends, didn't allow himself any comfort. While others his age were partying, Kelechi was building. Nobody around him noticed, nobody cared. To most people, he was just a young man working at a fuel station, struggling to survive. But one person did notice. An older man, Mr. Adeyemi, who often stopped at the station, saw Kelechi reading tech books during his breaks. One evening he asked, "Young man, why are you reading those things instead of resting?" That simple question led to a conversation, and soon Adeyemi became more than just a customer. He became a mentor. He encouraged Kelechi, gave him advice about business, and most importantly, told him not to give up when everything seemed impossible. Kelechi held on to those words tightly. Alone at night, typing code with tired hands, he whispered to himself, "One day they will all see. One day this dream will rise." And though the world didn't know it yet, Swift Connect Africa had just been born in the quiet struggle of a boy no one believed in. Months passed, and Kelechi's life slowly began to change. What started as late nights in front of an old laptop, coding with tired eyes, was now taking shape into something real. His app, Swift Connect Africa, was no longer just an idea on paper. It became a tool that transport companies in Lagos started noticing. At first, it was just a few small firms that tried it out, but soon word spread. They realized his system made deliveries faster, cheaper, and more reliable. Kelechi remembered the first time a company called him. He almost didn't pick up the phone because he thought it was a mistake. "Are you the creator of Swift Connect?" the manager asked. Kelechi's heart raced as he replied softly, "Yes, sir, that's me." That one call gave him the confidence he needed. More calls followed, more contracts signed, and little by little, his dream was becoming a reality. Investors soon began to take notice too. They saw something in Kelechi's vision that others had ignored. Meetings that once intimidated him now became opportunities. He walked into boardrooms in his simple shirt and trousers, speaking passionately about how logistics could change Africa's future. People were impressed not by his clothes or background, but by his determination and brilliance. Within months, Swift Connect went from being unknown to one of the fastest-growing logistics startups in Nigeria. By the time Kelechi was 28, he was no longer just a struggling boy working at a fuel station. He was now a CEO, respected, admired, and leading a company that was making headlines. The same boy who once cried on a bench in Woods, clutching an empty wallet, was now flying across Africa. He signed contracts in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, shaking hands with powerful business leaders who treated him as an equal. Every time he boarded a plane, looking out of the window at the clouds below, Kelechi remembered where he started. He remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, the tears he shed when his father stole his savings. And those memories didn't break him, they pushed him higher. He often whispered to himself before each big meeting, "This is for you, Mama. This is for the boy they called useless." What touched people the most was that Kelechi never forgot his roots. He hired young people who came from the same kind of background he did, those who only needed someone to believe in them. He told them, "If I can start with nothing and build this, so can you." His story spread like wildfire on social media, inspiring thousands of young Nigerians to chase their dreams despite the obstacles. Swift Connect Africa was no longer just an app. It became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that betrayal could be turned into power, and tears could be turned into triumph. And at the center of it all was Kelechi, the boy who had lost everything, only to rise and create more than he had ever imagined. While Kelechi was building his future brick by brick, life in his father's mansion was going in the opposite direction. Chief Obinna, once known across Abuja as a powerful businessman, was slowly losing everything he had worked for. What had seemed like wealth without end was now slipping through his fingers. Ngozi, his new wife, loved showing off her status. Every week, she demanded more. Designer clothes from Europe, jewelry that glittered under every party light, expensive trips with her friends. She spent money as if the family accounts were endless rivers of gold. Whenever Obinna tried to slow her down, she snapped back, "Are you not the great Chief Obinna? People must see our standard." Her words fed his pride, and he allowed her to continue, not realizing that pride was silently eating away at his fortune. Then there was Tebena, the stepson who was supposed to carry the family name forward. Instead of managing business, he was chasing nightlife. He spent late nights in clubs, drinking, gambling, and showing off the luxury car Kelechi's stolen savings had bought him. He surrounded himself with fake friends who loved him for his money but disappeared the moment his pockets emptied. The family business, once strong, was left in Tebena's careless hands, and it began to collapse. Deals were missed, workers were unpaid, and clients moved to competitors. Whispers began to spread around Abuja. At first, it was quiet, Just rumors among businessmen that Obinna was losing control. But soon the whispers grew louder. People gossiped at events saying, "Did you hear? Chief Obinna's company is drowning in debt." The same man who once walked into rooms with his head high was now avoiding public places. His phone, which used to ring with investors seeking his time, now rang with creditors demanding their money. Obinna's pride turned into sleepless nights. He argued constantly with Ngozi, who still refused to stop her spending. Tebena, meanwhile, laughed off every warning, saying, "Don't worry, Dad, things will turn around." But nothing turned around. The empire was crumbling faster than they could patch it. The humiliation became public when one of Obinna's cars was repossessed in front of neighbors. People who once bowed to him now shook their heads in pity. Some even mocked him behind his back. "Look at the mighty Obinna," they said. "He chased away his real son, and now see what remains." For the first time in his life, Chief Obinna felt powerless. The weight of debts, the emptiness of his home filled with greed, and the shame of public downfall broke the very image he had built for years. The same father who once sneered at his son and told him to learn his place was now learning a painful lesson of his own. Betrayal doesn't always come from outsiders. Sometimes it comes from the ones you choose over family. And as Kelechi was rising across Africa, Obinna was sinking deeper into disgrace. The tables had quietly begun to turn. The night of the big corporate event in Victoria Island was filled with glittering lights, polished shoes, and powerful people. Business leaders from across Nigeria had gathered to network and win investors. Chief Obinna and Tebena walked into the grand hall, both dressed in expensive suits, though their faces carried the weight of desperation. Their empire was collapsing, and they knew this event might be their last chance to convince people they still mattered. Obinna adjusted his tie, whispering to Tebena, "Tonight we must impress. Investors must believe we are still strong." Tebena, trying to hide his nerves, nodded and forced a smile, though deep inside he knew the truth. The business was already gone. The event began with music and introductions. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, and whispered about new opportunities. Obinna and Tebena moved from group to group, shaking hands, pretending their lives were still intact. For a moment, Obinna felt a spark of hope. Maybe we can recover. Maybe no one knows how bad things really are, he thought. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker tonight, a young visionary, the man behind one of Africa's fastest-growing logistics firms, the new majority shareholder of a major logistics conglomerate, Mr. Kelechi Obinna." The room fell silent. Gasps spread across the hall. Heads turned. Obinna froze, his mouth slightly open, while Tebena's eyes widened in disbelief. And then, walking onto the stage in a tailored suit, confident and radiant, was none other than Kelechi, the son they had dismissed, humiliated, and cast aside. The lights shone on him as he greeted the audience with calm authority. He no longer looked like the boy who once cried on a bench in was. He looked like a man who had fought battles and won. His voice was steady as he began to speak about innovation, growth, and the future of logistics in Africa. The crowd listened with admiration, nodding and clapping. Obinna's hands shook as he gripped his glass tighter. He whispered to himself, This cannot be." His mind raced. How did my son get here? But the biggest shock was still to come. When Kelechi was introduced fully, the announcer added, "Through recent acquisitions, Mr. Kelechi is now the majority shareholder of a logistics conglomerate that has taken over several struggling companies, including the one once owned by Chief Obinna." The words cut through the room like thunder. Everyone turned to look at Obinna. The same people he had hoped to impress now stared at him with pity, some even with a hint of mockery. Tebena's face burned red, his arrogance melting into shame. Ngozi, who had tagged along to enjoy the glory of the night, excused herself and slipped out quietly, unable to bear the humiliation. On stage, Kelechi did not gloat. He did not even look directly at his father. But his very presence, his very success, was the answer to all the years of betrayal. The boy they had mocked as useless was now the man in control, the man they could no longer ignore. The tables had turned, and the whole world was watching. The hall was filled with golden light, but for Chief Obinna, It felt like a spotlight of shame. His throat went dry, his palms sweaty, as the announcer's words replayed in his mind. Kelechi is now the majority shareholder, including the company once owned by Chief Obinna. He could not believe it. His legs trembled as he whispered, barely able to breathe. This can't be. His voice cracked, weak and broken, so unlike the powerful tone he once carried. Kelechi finally turned his eyes toward his father. Calm, steady, but sharp like a blade, his gaze cut deeper than any words could. He took a pause, then spoke in a voice that carried through the entire hall. You took my future and handed it to him. Tonight I take back everything. The silence that followed lasted only a second before the room erupted. Investors rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, nodding in admiration. They weren't just applauding a business success. They were applauding justice. The boy who was once humiliated had returned, not with tears but with triumph. Obinna sank back into his chair, his face pale. He wanted to vanish, to escape the stares piercing into him from every corner of the hall. The same businessmen who once begged for his attention now whispered to one another, shaking their heads at his downfall. His empire, his pride, his image, it was all gone. Obinna sat beside him, frozen, his cheeks flushed red with embarrassment, his lips pressed tightly together. Just months ago he had mocked Kelechi, thanking him for sponsoring his ride. Now he couldn't even lift his head. His arrogance had turned into shame, and the car that once gave him pride now felt like a chain around his neck. He avoided everyone's eyes, but he knew they were all looking at him, judging, laughing, despising. Ngozi, unable to bear it, stood up abruptly. Her heels clicked loudly against the marble floor as she stormed out of the hall. Her pride, once so untouchable, was shattered. She had paraded herself as the queen of Obinna's world, boasting about her son's success. Now, with everything exposed, she couldn't stand the humiliation. Whispers followed her as she pushed through the doors, her face stiff with rage. Kelechi, still standing tall on the stage, did not gloat. He did not laugh or shout. He simply let the truth speak for itself. His presence, his success, and his calm dignity were enough to silence every insult, every humiliation he had ever endured. Power without wisdom destroys itself, Kelechi said firmly, addressing the crowd but letting his words sink into his father's heart. And betrayal only builds stronger hearts. Tonight is not about revenge. It is about reclaiming what was stolen. The applause grew louder, filling the hall with thunder. Chief Obinna lowered his head, unable to face the son he once dismissed. And for the first time, the world saw not the mighty Obinna, but a broken man sitting in the shadow of the son he betrayed. After the event ended and the crowd left buzzing about Kelechi's victory, Chief Obinna sat alone in a quiet corner of the hall. The applause for his son still echoed in his ears like a haunting reminder of what he had lost. Not just his company, but his dignity, his name, and most painfully, his son's trust. For the first time in many years, he felt small. The power he once carried was gone, and in its place was a heavy weight of regret. He finally gathered the courage to approach Kelechi, who was speaking with a few investors. When their conversation ended, Obinna pulled his son aside, his voice trembling. Son, please forgive me. I was blind. I didn't see your worth. I didn't see your heart. I chose pride and foolishness instead of you. Kelechi looked at him quietly. For a moment, the boy inside him, the one who once cried in the dark streets of Wuz, wanted to collapse into his father's arms and feel loved again. But he remembered the years of pain, the humiliation, the loneliness, and how his father's betrayal had almost broken him. He stood tall, his voice calm but firm. Father, I am not here for revenge. I did not build all this to destroy you. I built it to protect what you destroyed. But one thing you must understand, never again will you choose another over me. Never again will you treat me as if I am less. The words struck Obinna deeper than any insult could. His lips trembled, his chest rose and fell as if he were struggling to breathe. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, tears rolled down his cheeks. Real tears, not of anger but of shame and regret. The same man who once sneered with pride, who once commanded boardrooms with his voice, now stood before his own son, broken and weeping. Forgive me, he whispered again, his knees almost buckling. It was not just an apology. It was a plea, a desperate cry from a father who had finally realized the cost of his betrayal. Kelechi's heart softened slightly, but he did not move to hug him. He placed a hand gently on his father's shoulder and said, "I respect you as my father, but respect is not something you can demand. It is something you earn. You lost mine when you chose him over me. Tonight, you must face the truth of your own actions." Obinna lowered his head, ashamed as more tears fell. The image of power and control he once carried was shattered forever. In that private moment, away from the lights and applause, he was not Chief Obinna the businessman. He was simply a man who had lost his son's trust. And for the first time in his life, he understood. Betrayal may win for a season, but it always comes back with a price. The next morning, the press and company employees gathered in the grand hall of Swift Connect Africa. Cameras flashed, microphones were raised, and all eyes were fixed on the young CEO who had shaken the business world overnight. Kelechi stood on stage, not with anger, not with pride, but with quiet strength. He began slowly, his voice steady. "I was once called useless. I was laughed at. I was robbed of my own savings by the people who were supposed to protect me. That night I thought my life was over. But today I stand here because pain became my fuel." The hall fell silent. Every word hit deep. He paused, letting his eyes travel across the room, from journalists to employees, before continuing. "To anyone who has ever been overlooked, betrayed, or told they don't matter, remember this: your story isn't over. Betrayal can break you, yes, but it can also build you. I am living proof." The hall erupted in applause, louder and louder, until it echoed through the building. Some employees wiped tears from their eyes, inspired by the man who had turned his suffering into success. His words spread quickly across social media, making headlines across Nigeria. People shared his story with captions like, "From betrayed son to Africa's youngest CEO," and tears turned into triumph. Kelechi walked off the stage with his head held high. He no longer carried the weight of being a victim. He was no longer the boy crying in the streets of Wuz. He was a man who had turned betrayal into victory, owning everything his father once denied him.